challenges, but teams, these things happen. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Central Coast Local Planning Panel. I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting today and to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise the continued connection of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people to our lands and waterways, and acknowledge our shared responsibility to care for and protect places and people. As you know, the meeting is being recorded and webcast. The members of the panel today are me, Donna Reigate, as the chair, Linda McClure and Mike Ryan as our expert professional panel members, and Scott McGrath as our nominated community panel member. We don't have any apologies. We're dealing with a couple of DAs this afternoon that meet the state government's criteria for a public meeting. Those would be a proposal at 8 Priestman Avenue, Umina Beach, and another one at 5 The Avenue, Carryong. We will also discuss, once the public meeting's over, a land and environment court matter in relation to a proposal at Blue Bay. As is always the case, we've been provided with assessment reports prepared by council staff. We've done site orientation, and council staff have briefed the panel on the issues that are raised in the applications. We've seen the public submissions, all of those things. We've got a couple of people registered to speak this afternoon. Francis Whiffen in relation to the Umina Beach matter, and I can't see you there, Mr. Whiffen, but hopefully you are there, and welcome back to the panel. It will be good to hear from you again. And in relation to the carry-on proposal, we have, it appears there's a number of people in that room, but only one of them is registered to speak, who's called Jason Cranage. So how this works, the panel hears from the speakers. Members of the public have 3 minutes to speak, and not that it's particularly relevant on this occasion, because we don't have a number of members of the public speaking on the one for which we've got an applicant's rep, but the applicant's rep gets a total of 15 minutes to respond to the various members of the public. Okay, we'll move into the agenda. Declarations of interest. Panel members have submitted their declarations and no conflicts of interest have been identified. Has anybody come across anything since then that they need to declare?
No, Madam Chair.
No, and I can't see you, Scott, but I'm hoping
no, I have not.
You'll say not if that's the case. Lovely.
Yep.
I should note that a member of council staff declared an interest in relation to the carry-on matter and confirmed that they won't participate, or wouldn't participate in any briefings or indeed discussion of that matter. We've got minutes of a previous meeting of the panel held on the 12th of October, which are submitted for noting. Are the panel members happy to note those? Yes? I'm taking it yes, unless I hear from you otherwise. Yep. All right.
Yes, that's fine.
We might leap straight into speakers. And as I said before, our first speaker is Mr. Whiffen in relation to the Umina Beach matter. So over to you, Mr. Whiffen.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the local planning panel for this opportunity to address you today. First of all, on behalf of the Peninsula Residents Association, I'd like to once again thank the council planners for their diligence and attention to detail. The detection of the variations in the floor space ratio and height was particularly noteworthy. The PRA wholeheartedly support the council's recommendation for refusal of this DA. If you look at number 8 Priestman Avenue on Google Maps, satellite view, you will see quite a lot of green vegetation, roughly 30%. This proposal, as with virtually all gun barrels, proposes to reduce that to 0%. Of course, there may be some token, excuse me, landscaping planted at project completion, but if you look at other gun barrels on Google Maps, there's even some across the road, from this one that have been completed, you'll see that this is generally of such a small scale as to be virtually undetectable. It's not just the PRA that are calling for more tree canopy and vegetation cover on the peninsula. It is specifically mentioned in the Central Coast Regional Plan 2041 under planning for the Narara district, planning priority number 2. It states that Woy Woy is the most populous and urbanized area on the Central Coast, and that future planning will consider the potential impacts of climate change, including the urban heat island effect, and that the urban tree canopy will be increased. Just to outline the scale of the problem, Mr. Hart has mentioned a figure of 8,500 trees to green the peninsula. Now, it's generally accepted by experts that 30% tree canopy is what's required to help alleviate the predicted extended periods of high temperatures due to temperature change. While 8,500 trees would be a great improvement and very welcome, they would not be nearly enough. If they were all somehow planted tomorrow and they all managed to thrive over the next 10 years, they could be expected to each have a canopy size of about 50 square meters in 2033, and that's being optimistic. 8,500 times 50 equals 425,000, which is a lot. It's nearly half a square kilometre. However, the peninsula is 14.8 square kilometres. So the 8,500 trees would shade about 3%. As the average canopy cover over the peninsula is as low as 11% in some suburbs, such as Booker Bay, we need at least another 10%. With the current tree replacement budget of Central Coast Council at only $40,000 per annum, the community need the council to continue to have a high intolerance of variations for DAs such as this one, which push us even further into the red zone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whiffen. Now, we don't have anybody else registered to speak on that application, and interestingly, we don't have anybody representing the applicant on that one. Members of the panel, do any of you have any questions for Mr. Whiffen in relation to any of his comments, or indeed any questions for council staff in relation to the Umina Beach matter?
No, I have no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anyone else?
No questions.
No, thank you.
No, you're off the hook, Mr. Whiffen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the carry-on matter. And as I said, we have Jason Cranage, who has registered to speak this afternoon. So over to you, Jason.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, panel members, council officers and members of the community here today. My name is Jason Cranage. I'm a Senior Development Manager for the Stevens Group and representing the company in regard to our application at 5 The Avenue Carry-On today. Also, I've got Paul Cutting from the Stevens Group and our town planner, Lynn Armstrong, with me. Stevens Group secured the land, the subject site from the Central Coast Regional Development Corporation in 2016 as part of a government tender process. The site was advertised as a highway commercial precinct, and a range of uses are permissible, including fast food, bulky goods, business and retail premises. The subject application conforms with the originally submitted master plan as part of that original tender process. Under Council's current DCP, development in the highway commercial precinct is to be orientated towards the Central Coast Highway and to be accessed via the avenue. The site is identified as having low heritage significance, as it is remote from the heritage core, which is focused on buildings associated with the original Gosford Farm home for boys. The land that is the subject of this application sits outside of the recommended heritage curtilage in the Mount Penang Conservation Management Plan. Our vision for the site is to develop a high-quality commercial precinct with the establishment cost, such as roads, lead-in services and landscaping, supported by the early development of a fast food area containing 3 established operators, namely McDonald's, Aporto and Taco Bell, plus a tyre outlet. These uses are all typical highway commercial uses and are compatible with the existing buildings adjoining the site. At the outset, I would like to say that our approach is to work with council and to comply as closely as possible with council planning controls, and we are disappointed that we have not achieved this. We note the recommendation is for refusal, and the grounds provided in the report indicate the areas where we have not complied. We had worked with council staff from the day we lodged the application to ensure we satisfied council's concerns. In fact, by early this year, we believe we had adequately addressed all of the major issues the council had presented to us, including obtaining approvals from the Royal Rural Fire Service, Heritage New South Wales, and Transport for New South Wales, which was a result of an extensive traffic modelling exercise in engagement with the external agencies since 2021. It was a shock, therefore, when after 5 months of no formal communication from the council, we received a short email in late September this year advising our application would be recommended for refusal. A subsequent urgent meeting with council staff led to a request for us to lodge amended plans, but this request was refused. The reasons for council's recommendation for refusal can be summarised as follows: loss and impact on vegetation, impact on streetscape, public submissions, and non-compliance with the DCP for the site. I would like now to address these 4 issues. Firstly, in relation to vegetation impacts, we felt we had resolved council's concerns in our revised plan submitted in December 22, because we had no further communication from council on this issue until the email in late September 23. In relation to the comments regarding loss of both hollow-bearing trees, our ecologist advises all significant hollow-bearing trees were avoided. And because there are excess hollows within the local community, the proposed removal of the trees with hollows was not considered a significant impact. Our ecologist also advises that, contrary to the council report, the loss of swift parrot habitat is not significant, as it is degraded and inferior habitat to areas adjoining the site not impacted by the development. The second issue relates to the streetscape impacts, and we believe that when the precinct is complete, it will achieve the outcomes desired in the council's DCP. But at this first stage, we are constrained by the style of building required to meet the needs of our prospective tenants. The tree buffer along the southern boundary of the site facing the Central Coast Highway will screen much of what is proposed in the first stage from the highway. The point regarding visual intrusive signage is accepted and could be addressed if we had known that this was an important issue to council. While the initial stage may not reflect some of the outcomes in the DCP, it is our intention to deliver an overall precinct that has a high quality built form with a landscaped environment that takes advantage of existing significant trees. The third issue relates to the community's concerns expressed in their objections. There are 2 major themes: potential negative health impacts and potential traffic impacts. With respect to the health concerns, we would agree with the comments in the planning report, namely that health outcomes and human behaviour are not issues that planning controls can resolve. With respect to the traffic impacts, we refer to the findings of our detailed traffic modelling, which shows that there will be minimal impacts on either the Central Coast Highway or the avenue, provided we construct an additional right turn lane from the avenue westbound onto the highway. The remaining issue, which is non-compliance with the council DCP, and in particular the left turn lane into the site from the highway, is, we believe, the main issue that is driving council's focus on refusing the application. The council report fails to note it has been known from the outset that the avenue doesn't have sufficient capacities for traffic without the left in. Independent traffic reports have been undertaken by Traffic for New South Wales and the now Hunter Regional Development Corporation. Both traffic reports endorsed the left in from the highway. As we explained, the fast food area is a key component of how the development of this precinct can be unlocked. This component cannot work unless a left turn is provided from the highway into the site. This is why Stevens Group worked very closely with Transport for New South Wales to prove up a solution we currently have in our design. Transport for New South Wales have issued their approval to this design because they believe it provides a good traffic solution that minimises impacts on the highway and the local network. We find it difficult, therefore, to understand why the assessment report does not agree. It should be noted that the reference to potential traffic diversions attracted by the proposed service station are unfounded, as no service station is proposed in this application. The remaining traffic concerns relate to unclear manoeuvring and legal access for service vehicles. This would have been addressed had we been permitted to lodge amended plans, and is simple to accommodate through minor changes to road alignment and through the provisions of easements and for access. There are other departures from council's controls, such as the lack of a water cycle management plan. We have a report dated April 22 that has somehow failed to upload to the portal, but would have addressed this had we been requested to do so. In conclusion, we believe this is a good development which will result in the management and protection of the significant tree buffer via a vegetation management plan implemented through conditions of consent. Importantly, the current proposal will deliver local jobs to the community and result in a development that will remove the existing antisocial activities present on the site, including rubbish dumping and drug behaviour, as well as the general deterioration of the vegetation through invasive weeds. The highway commercial precinct can ultimately achieve the vision of a quality development outlined in the DCP if it can be commenced with the first stage as proposed in the current application. Accordingly, we request the panel to approve this application. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel.
Thank you very much. Okay, members of the panel, questions for our speaker, Mr. Cranich, or anybody from the council in relation to this one?
What volume of traffic was assessed in the traffic reports?
Sorry, is that Scott?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what volume of traffic?
Yeah.
The details, the specific details. Yeah. So it was based off obviously the proposed uses. I don't have the sort of technical detail in front of me, but or our technical consultants. Is it you're just wondering the number of trips and additional traffic to the area, or?
It strikes me as odd to say that there'd be minimal traffic impacts with the scale of the development on those roads.
Yeah, I think there was induced traffic. There was two sort of assumptions that, in the traffic report prepared by Arcadis. I think there was yeah, we used all of our traffic. Lynn's saying our traffic assumptions were all from the RTA's, guide to trip generation assumptions. Okay. There's figures in there. There's plenty of work done with transport, but there's passing trade discounts, etc. I think in total, the traffic numbers increased in the realms of sort of 3%. But obviously the addition of the left in before the avenue took that sort of additional traffic out of that space, and then the upgrade to the avenue, which included an extension to a right turn lane and an additional right turn lane, also helped that sort of level of service for that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of questions I have. The first one is I'd like to get your response to the first ground of refusal dealing with the uses not being consistent with the zone objective.
And do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
I'll just ask if I'm.
Yeah, would Lynn
Sure.
be able to respond to the panel? Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Yep.
From my knowledge of the site and the history of the site, the Hunter Development Corporation liaised with council very early days on the zoning for this land, and it was decided to make it a highway commercial precinct as reflected in the DCP, and there's site-specific uses that are in the SP1 zone. as they were the uses that were deemed most appropriate in this location. When you go through the DCP, it actually identifies this area of the site as having the least heritage significance given where it's located. And the uses that we've proposed are straight out of the SP1 table. And they were known at the outset that they would be fast food outlets and various other highway uses. John reflected that originally in about 2011 when we made the first tender for the government land, when it was put up for expressions of interest, and we haven't varied from that master plan. All we've done is reduce the uses to ensure that we don't have a volume of traffic that exceeds what's considered the capacity at the moment. There is talk in all of the traffic studies that have been done of a future connection between the avenue and Kangaroo Road, and that's work that's been done by Transport for New South Wales and by the Development Corporation. That road, though, is not funded at this point in time. So we've been constrained to the uses that we have proposed, and we know that we cannot get any further uses approved on this site until such time as the traffic issues are resolved. And that's seen to be through that connecting road through to Kangaroo.
Right. Okay. And the other question I have is dealing with what the report says the development results in significant cut and fill with earthworks. Can someone address that issue in terms of the extent of earthworks and the necessity for it?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yep.
The site generally falls from Festerville Drive to the highway. There's obviously a number of ways that that fall can be addressed, and at the time this application was prepared, a retaining wall of about, I think, 2 metres or 2.5 metres was proposed.
Two in its worst position down to sort of 0.6 on the eastern side of the site. Yeah.
That could be reduced, and if council afforded us the opportunity, we would be able to reduce it. But there will still ultimately be a level of retaining on the highway. There needs to be retaining across the site at various locations, but my view is that we could address that by staggering it to reduce the overall heights as you work your way back towards Festival Drive.
Where's the 2 metre retaining wall?
Just on the sort of western side of the lot
the McDonald's side.
Lot 5. So I think that the answer to that is that from an engineering standpoint is that it could probably be some benching across the site to minimise that retaining, and that's certainly something we would look at, and we would probably propose to council that we would look at. However, council most recently weren't willing to receive any sort of additional information at this point, following their sort of September notice of a refusal. But from a design standpoint, it's something that can be addressed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Mike?
No, thank you.
Linda?
Just in relation to the retaining wall, what is the impact of that on the 20-metre buffer of vegetation?
Yeah, it's obviously on the inside of the 20-metre buffer, but
I would say it's outside the 20.
I meant on the inside of the development. Sorry, outside the 20-metre buffer. But the impact that we looked at it in comparison to a tree overlay where the sort of where it clashes with, I suppose, tree protection zones, and it was sort of minimal in that western side with a higher sort of location, but it's certainly something that could be addressed through design changes if required. But I
would say that the retaining wall is not really the issue, because the retaining wall is generally aligned with the car park. So whether it's a retaining wall or Yeah, well, not even a batter, but concrete for the drive-through lanes or the car park area, it's still going to have an impact on, on the trees in that area. So our arborist has recommended any trees that would be impacted by where the tree protection zone, I think, would be greater than 10%. He's recommended removal of those trees. But there's opportunities to increase the alignment or increase the setback to the retaining wall, but only by 1 or 2 metres in various locations. But there's definitely an opportunity for us to reduce the height and increase the setback by a minimal amount.
You mentioned the drive-through lanes. Did you consider any alternative design where you might have parking along next to the buffer zone so that you could retain trees and put a more soft landscaping rather than harsh concrete?
Yeah, we actually spent a lot of time on the design. This is not the first iteration of it. I think one thing we haven't mentioned at this stage is the gradient between Central Coast Highway and Festival Drive, which is the area that we're working between. Obviously, we still need vehicles to be able to enter the site safely from that left in and move between the two. So gradients are limited to some extent there. And obviously, we're not filling the 20-metre buffer that's left in its natural state. So we need to step up to provide relatively level pads. At the very outset, we tried to orientate things to Festival Drive at the rear, and you end up with all your loading docks and very unattractive arrangements facing the highway. So it's been a juggle of things to make sure that each of our development sites actually has frontage to the highway and then the opportunity for screening of landscape. So, well, the design has been through the Heritage Council, and they've gone to great lengths to compare our design with what's spelled out in the Conservation Management Plan for the entire precinct, and they've concluded that we meet the requirements. So I'm not an architect, but I do know that, you certainly don't want your loading docks fronting the highway. So
I'm assuming the Heritage Council specifically care about the state heritage item rather than the trees.
Well, I would say the entire site is heritage listed, although the Highway Commercial Precinct is out of it. The trees are a local heritage listing, and I did make inquiries before we even purchased the site about the significance of the scribbly gum. And I think if you have a look, you'll find that the scribbly gum group is not actually mapped. But the DCP requires a 20-metre setback to the road, which to me says that the trees that were of interest are mainly in the road reserve and that front 20 metres of the site. The rest of the site is introduced landscaping for public parking that was used in association with the festival grounds. So that's been hard stand, or was hard stand, for many years.
I think it's important to note to the panel that these issues have been raised with us only sort of recently as critical issues. As I said, we sort of haven't heard anything from council for the majority of 2023. And we would have addressed these design issues, everything that you're talking about, retaining walls, etc. If we were afforded the opportunity. We weren't afforded that opportunity, and we're obviously being recommended for refusal at the panel. But so I think it's important to note that whilst these issues might have been raised last year, it was our assumption that they were sort of resolved in our submissions back to the council, RFI submissions back to the council in December 2022. So we understand that there's some design issues there. Can they be sort of addressed? And the majority of them can be, but we weren't afforded that opportunity. Yeah.
So as the report says, you've had previous goes at this, and I think the issues in relation to the vegetation and the cut and fill and those sorts of things were raised previously. Isn't that the case?
Yes. Having said that, if we've probably now tagged the trees out there 4 or 5 times, And you might recall all the heavy rainfall that we had there over the past few years. There are nowhere near as many trees there now as there were. They've just fallen over. And the site has been significantly degraded. I think Jason alluded to the drug use that goes on there, and that's what our arborists are reporting back. Every time they go, there's lots of paraphernalia there under those trees, and the tags are removed as a bit of a sport. The main issue has been identifying the scribbly gum group as it's identified in the L7 portion of the site as the heritage item, and then the remainder of trees on the site. In one of the past submissions, one of council's ecologists came back and raised issues with the European plantings, or the plantings that had been undertaken in the car park.
Right.
That, you know, so we've had a lot of discussions with different people about things. The other issue was that the swift parrot, you know, our advice was that swift parrot mapping has occurred, but the habitat on site is really not suitable for the swift parrot. But the problem is, once it's mapped, you need to take account of the impact of development on the swift parrot, even though it doesn't necessarily occur on the site, it's on the site. So, yeah, we have had advice from people previously, but it hasn't necessarily been backed up by our consultants, I suppose.
Can I just
I've got, just to answer the initial question, the Heritage Council, I've got a letter here from the Heritage Council to Central Coast Council, and they've definitely raised the scribbly gum habitat as an item for consideration in their letter. So they have addressed, they have had concern for the L7 scribbly gum groups.
And Don, I suppose back to you, sorry, Chair, back to your question just in relation to the previous sort of refusals. I think the current council report lists out about 15 odd reasons. I think in actual fact the panel report listed 5 from the previous application. If I can just note that those main reasons for refusal were no GTA from general terms of approval from Heritage Council and no concurrence from Transport, both of which the Stevens Group has focused on for a long period of time to resolve that through, you know, significant traffic modelling, etc., with Transport and engagement with Heritage Council of New South Wales to try and overcome those previous reasons of refusal. And it was our understanding that the major issues there were those 2 items rather than retaining more locations, etc.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I was interested in the veg issues as well. Tell me again why it's not possible to have the access to your site from the avenue rather than from the highway.
Well, there still is access from the avenue, so I think
why do you need the access from the highway?
So the sort of supplementary left-in access.
Yeah,
is why we need that. That's just for our prospective tenants, so we can operate our.
No.
The traffic numbers don't. If all the traffic is entering and leaving via the avenue falls over. The queue lengths at in the peak hour, particularly the evening peak hour, exceed acceptable standards. Right. So what happens with providing a left in is that it takes some of the load off the avenue, particularly for access for eastbound traffic. Also delays the time that vehicles are queuing from the expressway coming through lights in the peak hour. The traffic's taken off the road and then put back on, so it spreads the traffic. And as I say, we had our traffic report done by Arcadis, and I'd say we've probably had 5 different iterations. We've had a left in, a left out, a left in only, various scenarios for upgrading of the avenue to move traffic out of there westbound. And we actually submitted all of that to Transport for New South Wales. In the meantime, Transport for New South Wales has been talking to HCRDC about traffic generally in that precinct and what happens with the balance of the land and how things operate now, and the fact that there are lengthy delays as people are leaving the school at certain times. And in all of those reports that have now been done independently of us, they've recommended the left in.
Right.
So it's not just something that, you know,
Yes, I think that's a fair point. There's other independent reports done by GHD for Hunter Regional Development Corporation that all
Traffic for New South Wales.
Transport for New South Wales that have commissioned their own that also all support that left in movement, and as Lynn said, it's just the avenue will fail without it.
Yeah.
And I think Lynn also made the point earlier about you know, some proper road planning around there and linkage to Kangaroo Road and things of that sort that hasn't happened yet.
That's all in the future, but everyone has signed off on this development proposal as stage 1, and with the left in, there not being any traffic issues associated with it. So
and
even
it's a bit of a trade-off between the left in and the trees.
Yeah, well, there's also, well, I guess if the site is to be developed at all, there needs to be a left in. And the trees
because the road network's not adequate in terms of the capacity of the avenue.
Sorry.
That's right. That's correct, yes.
Because of the capacity of the avenue.
Yeah. Okay. All right, members of the panel, we got anything else we want to ask these people?
Yeah, can I just have a follow-up question to Lynn? You mentioned that this is stage 1 and you can't do any more development until the traffic is resolved in a better way.
Well, no, until there is there's a number of options. At the moment, everyone's traffic reports are suggesting this connection through to Kangaroo Road.
But what I really wanted to ask you was, do you have a stage 2, 3? Have you got proposals for the rest of the site?
From our first DA, we were asked to take a holistic view. So all of our traffic studies looked at the entirety of the gardens. So we've looked at not only our site, but land adjoining further down towards Canada, all of the Borg land. And we had to make assumptions about what sort of development would be there and what traffic it would generate. So we've peeled back, but even now, you know, we've got all that background information, and so do the other reports that have been done. So the area's been looked at holistically. They're currently upgrading Baxter Track, which will take traffic from the school out through Kangaroo Road. So there are other things that are happening in the background, but we can only deal with what we have in front of us at the moment. And as that report notes, the report to you, the avenue Festival Drive in particular was meant to be dedicated as public road. It still hasn't been accepted by council as public road. So in effect, the only public road frontage we have is to the highway. That lot has been created and registered, and the report says that the avenue and Festival Drive are still private.
So I think, so should we address what possible future uses might be?
Oh, the possible future uses that we've looked at previously. We had a medical centre, we've had a supermarket, we've had childcare, we had interest from an aged care facility. There's been all sorts of interest in the site, but as I've said, it's limited to this amount of floor space and traffic generation by the capacity of the roads.
What about a service station?
Yeah, we would have loved the service station, but it's not zoned for that.
It's not a permissible use here.
No.
Okay, well, anyone who think you might need a development corporation that's responsible for the planning and delivery of economic and urban development in the area. Anyway, there you go. Okay. Anybody got anything else to ask these people?
Madam Chair, it's Robert here from Council. Could I just say a few words?
Yes, if you must.
Just on the issue, the history of the application and that, the development control plan and the rezoning or the zoning of this site has been in for quite some time. It was originally zoned for the Festival Development Corporation under the IDO, then got transferred to the Gosford Plan Scheme Ordinance. The DCP for the site, even though it's been amended once at least, I think, is still provided for the internal access from the avenue and from Kangaroo Road, no access to the highway frontage. The previous application that was submitted and refused, it was not supported by Office of Environmental Heritage and the Transport for New South Wales. Without those supports, Council could not approve the application. It was also refused for a number of other reasons, non-compliance with DCP and so forth. They were not the only reasons. The point I'd like to make out now too is that since the application was lodged about mid last year, this application, there's been that much to and fro between or with the Transport for New South Wales about what can or should happen up there. I think I've lost count the number of times it's been backwards and forwards with them. So basically, they've given their approval, which means that it's now back on Council to assess the impacts. The Transport for New South Wales letter actually says they want, if it's approved, a number of additional matters like the left turn deceleration lane, they want street lighting and so forth. And also additional bus stops or something inside. But the big thing is in their response is they're putting it, or they say to Council, the environmental impact of any of those works is up to Council to consider. They haven't considered them.
Right.
As far as the as far as tree reports, ecology reports and so forth, as far as I can remember, there's been at least 2 goes at having amended tree reports and ecology reports. And after the last letter we got from the Rural Fire Service on the 2nd of August this year, our engineer, ecologist and tree officer still do not believe there's adequate information there, or the information we have does not support approval of the application.
Thank you. Okay. Last call, members of the panel. Anything for
Yeah, can I just jump in quickly?
Yeah.
Just with those impacts of the vegetation. So the left in obviously intersects it. Are there any other services or any other construction that would intersect that vegetation buffer?
We actually have provided previous detail about underboring of services, but again, the services can be relocated if that's an issue, but our advice from our ecologist and our arborist and ecologist is that with the underboring, there would be no impact on that 20-metre buffer zone.
So it runs east-west, Scott, the services. So
talking about sewer and stormwater.
Sewer and stormwater run along inside the property boundary, inside the outside of the 20-metre green buffer. But yeah, the construction methodology was suggested to be non-destructive digging, where it sort of clashed with TPZs.
We've investigated. We could move.
We can. Yeah. So Paul raises a good point. This is another one of the issues that if we had the opportunity, we could look to amend that so they could run in another alignment outside of the TPZ.
Okay, but so within the retaining wall, is that right?
It could run higher up in the lot, in between the avenue and
significant excavation.
Yeah. So it just becomes a deeper asset, more sort of trenching required. But there is alternate alignments, I should say, rather than along the edge of the green buffer.
Okay.
Righto, that's it for everybody. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I'd like to thank everybody who's participated this afternoon. I think that's been really helpful. As is usually the case, what happens now is that we adjourn into a deliberative session. We will endeavour to have the minutes of our meeting up on the council's website, preferably within a couple of days of the meeting. And yeah, that's sort of the usual practice. So thank you very much, people, for your time this afternoon and for your contributions. It has been helpful. I'll formally close this part of the meeting and ask members of the panel if you can be back on the deliberative link in, I don't know, what, it's 2:50 now, so 2:55. You got time to make a quick cuppa, and I'll see you all then. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.